in the agenda item. I just wanted to get your thoughts on
My sole concern is that
one.
there is a transparency in the transaction and the best outcomes for the community happen.
Okay, and the second question is your thoughts around any proceeds for the sale of the land going back into the county's Manukau area, just your thoughts around that.
Well, the governing body agreed to the Transform Manukau high-level project last year, which means that contributions from the first sale will go into Transform Manukau. If there's uplift, I believe there'll be a 50-50 split between Second Nature Charitable Trust and I'm assuming Transform Manukau.
Yep, so I'm assuming, just want to get your thoughts around that, if in fact it does happen, that's all.
Well, it's been agreed in terms of the high-level plan. The contributions will go into Transform Manukau.
Happy, not happy?
My thoughts are irrelevant. It's a policy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, whether you're happy or not.
My thoughts are the money should come back into my board area, the same as every other chair board would say, I'm sure.
Okay.
There is a pattern. There is a pattern. Councillor Newman.
Angela, just with respect to Resolution B, are you surprised that the leaseor who doesn't own the land would be party to a sale and purchase agreement for selling land that it doesn't own?
Well, yes, and that's why I'm here today. But it's all around, you know, in December 2016, I should have had all of this information. And I didn't have all of this information. It would have helped with decision making. And subsequent to that, in the meeting with Councillor Cohen-Simpson, it could have just come here, actually. It didn't need to come back to my board. It did not need to come back to my board for a decision, and we wouldn't be having this conversation today.
And with respect to E, are you anticipating that there will be a sale from the leaseor to the leasee, and then the leasee subsequently owning the land will then on-sell it at profit?
Correct.
Flipping.
Terrible.
Flipping.
It's called flipping, isn't it?
Thank you, Angela.
Flipping wrong.
As always.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, something's up there.
Beth. Oh, we have to, sorry. Well, someone could move. Thanking for the presentation from Angela.
I'll second that.
Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Watson. All those in favour?
Aye.
Welcome, Beth.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Morning, councillors.
Rodney Local Board, and we're here to talk about the Warkworth car park.
That's right. I'm here today to speak to you about the importance to Warkworth and the surrounding community of retaining a key piece of infrastructure known as the Baxter Street car park. The presentation that I'm making now and the vote at item 14 is being watched with interest by local media who have been following the story. And it's been keenly followed also on social media, so smile at the camera, they're watching. For those of you not already familiar with the area, and I understand the photos in your agenda don't actually show, but this car park, it's opposite the only designated bus stop in all of Warkworth. And that serves Intercity, Mana Naked Bus, the Mahu Express, Kowhai Connection and any charter services. So it's the only place to park if you're taking a trip out of town for the day or overnight. Construction of a second level on this car park actually features in our local board plan as a key advocacy item. So it's here on page 18 of the Rodney Local Board plan. And this demonstrates the huge community support via submissions we received on this topic leading up to the adoption of this plan, which I'll remind you is still operational and which was signed off by this governing body. I also note that the report before you today states that the Rodney Local Board does not endorse the proposed disposal of the site on the basis that it may be required for town centre parking purposes in the future. This is incorrect. It's needed now. So why do we need this car park? There's next to no public transport in the Warkworth area and certainly no public transport out of Warkworth in any direction. Currently, we have a large number of residents who drive into Warkworth from the surrounding area to carpool elsewhere or to work or to shop. And this is only going to grow with the completion of the motorway as more houses are constructed. And there's plenty of evidence in this with the Auckland Unitary Plan, the Future Urban Land Supply Strategy, and indeed the TFUG, or now Auckland Transport Supporting Growth document regarding development in the north of Warkworth, which is there. So more and more residents will need to use the town centre, both for shopping and for business. Now, due to a complete lack of safe pedestrian and cycling access into Warkworth from the east side of town, and that means through the Hill Street intersection, and incomplete footpath connections from the areas currently being developed to the south, west and soon to be north of Warkworth, even residents that live within close proximity to the CBD have no choice but to use their cars to come into town, whether it be to work or to shop, and particularly for all-day parking. So parking in Warkworth is already stretched to capacity. I know Auckland Transport may have done surveys that say otherwise, but surveys done in midwinter, midweek tend to have those results. And also they only survey the number of available parking spots in Warkworth, and most of those parking spots are 60 to 90 minute car parks. So there's always going to be turnover in those car parks, so you'll always observe them occasionally empty. But there's nothing 90 minutes plus, and certainly nothing all day. And what there is filled by early morning with commuters. So even appointments over 90 minutes long in Warkworth entail shifting one's car, and I know this because it happens to me regularly when I'm getting my hair done, going out to the car with the hair full of foils and having to move it. So the Pūhoi to Warkworth motorway, it's not due to be completed until 2021, but meanwhile we have a bus connection service being trialled from Warkworth to Silverdale starting in 2018. So there's no park and ride facility for this bus service, and none planned until completion of the motorway. Currently there's a private provider running 2 buses to Auckland City in the morning and back again in the evening, and so therefore commuters and workers have very little choice where they can park all day in Warkworth, and Baxter Street is full by 8 a.m. Now, as this shopping centre services the surrounding rural areas, people have no choice without public transport but to use their cars to get to it. Also, the local board wishes to carry out plans to improve the pedestrian space within the township, using shared space to create an environment that, as councillors know, has been so popular within the Auckland CBD. And when we do this, it's inevitable that we'll lose more car parks on the road. And this is vigorously opposed by retailers because of the shortage of parking. So developing the parking building allows us to develop the town centre. We think there's no guarantee that a private purchaser will provide adequate public parking, paid or unpaid, as it's unlikely a business case for a commercial entity would stack up. And parking, in fact, will become worse if the building is sold to office development, because they'll be requiring additional parking for their workers and their customers. We believe that a private sale is more likely to result in a land banker buying it for long-term development. Just historically, under Rodney District Council, money had been set aside to add another level to the car park at a future date, and of course that was absorbed at amalgamation. But because of this, ratepayers have had an expectation that their rates were going to be used to develop this car park for another level. And I think it's been glaringly obvious under the Auckland Unitary Plan, the Future Urban Land Supply Strategy and TFUG that Warkworth is a main growth node, but there seems to be a blind spot when it comes to providing the infrastructure required, and it's bizarrely counterintuitive to be selling a parking asset when parking will clearly be at a premium in the next 10 to 20 years. So the Baxter Street car park must not only be retained as one of the most important current pieces of infrastructure in the town, but it must be developed to add additional parking now. Thank you.
Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thank you, Beth, for that very strong presentation. You're doing a good job in advocating for your area and for Warkworth's car park there. As you know, this goes to the vote actually later today. So I just had 3 quick questions, just fleshing out some of the points you've just raised, Beth. I don't know if you want to note them, but I'll read all 3 to you.
Bring a pen. I'm paperless.
Oh, that's all right. Okay. Look, the first one, you talked about, the rezoning that's occurred around Warkworth, and I know that North Rodney's just gone live, right? So and we're trying to get infrastructure in there right now. I'd like to know in terms of if the local board knows the number of consents are in process right now, Beth, that'd be the first thing. The second thing would be, well, the second question is around the benefits of the ratepayers. You touched on like the ratepayers paid for this building, and now it's going to be sold potentially to private enterprise. So I don't think they would probably sit too well with most of the community. So trying to get your feel about the feeling around the community about that, the council asset going to private hands that they've paid for, but more importantly, any benefit for the ratepayer through that sale, potentially or not. And the third question, Beth, is if today when we discuss this and vote on it, we asked for Auckland Transport to explore alternatives, right, alternative all-day parking in or around Warkworth before they sold this building, would the local board be open to other suggestions, and could you perhaps indicate what the local board might be supportive of? Those are my three questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and remember all the questions. I've just written down a few things. So, firstly, you asked about the number of consents for new development. We're actually working with a group of planners and developers in Warkworth at the moment over the need for structure planning, and they tell us that there is currently 1,300 houses either in the consent process or about to be applying for consent at the moment, and so that represents growth of about 4,000 people and 2,000 more cars, and that's imminent. That's happening within the next 18 months to 2 years, not 10 years out. Those are figures that they can verify, and they're using to push for structure planning. Your second question, I wrote down my answer more than your question, but
Okay.
so can you just repeat what your question
Yeah,
was?
certainly, Beth, no trouble. Sorry to barge you with all those so quickly, but it was really if the community is a ratepayers paid for asset.
That's right.
It's about to sell into private hands,
Okay.
potentially.
Okay, well, I think that this is an area where there's obviously a lot of dissatisfaction currently with Auckland Council, and as you're probably aware, Rodney has had the highest dissatisfaction levels with the amalgamation, and it's issues like this that play directly into the hands of what I'd call the Rexit crowd, or Northern Action Group, it certainly becomes very political at that point, so it's something to consider. There's certainly a perception that the ratepayers paid in good faith to have this car park developed for future use, and that's now been taken away from them. I should also point out that at one stage, and it does allude to it in your report, that this parking area was to have been potentially a community centre for Warkworth, and that's why it was originally purchased. That community centre never went ahead. Instead, we had a refurbishment of the old town hall. So that town hall is just reopened with no parking. So this is the only parking available for the town hall as well.
It's across the road, isn't it, virtually?
Within walking distance, virtually across the road. Your third question was around alternatives that the local board would consider. There's been, Panuku have suggested that if this building was sold and the airspace above it, that it would be sold to a developer who could possibly be given some proviso in that agreement to provide parking. We don't really have enough information on that. We would need to see what that looks like. I find it difficult to believe that a commercial entity would provide parking over an office block development. It certainly doesn't sound viable unless they charge quite handsomely for it. But on the subject of paid parking, I think there could be some acceptance locally that additional parking, new parking in Warkworth may have to have some user pay component. So potentially another level constructed on the car parking building could be funded through parking fees. I haven't actually tested that with the community, but it's something the local board would look at and consider. The other thing with this parking building is there's currently no maintenance budget attached to it and I find that just inconceivable that council has an asset and doesn't provide a maintenance budget with it. So I feel that this is just a way of getting out of having to maintain the building by just flicking it on and hoping someone else will fix up the mess.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thank you, Beth.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Beth. Actually, that was part of my question was, do you think the community would, as a trade-off to keep this building, actually consider paid parking, especially for people that are maybe parking and carpooling and getting the benefit of using it all day at some sort of reasonable cost, and then help to fund maybe the upkeep and building it higher? You said you haven't canvassed it, but I mean,
No,
it
we
might
haven't.
be a
We haven't
trade-off
canvassed
the community
that.
might be
It could be
willing-
something that we go out with on the local board plan to consult on. I wouldn't like to answer for them until I had some feedback on it. But I think they would certainly be resistant to having any paid parking in Warkworth until they have somewhere to park their cars to use the bus service that's starting next year. So it may be that once we have a park and ride facility, any additional new parking in the town centre, there may be some acceptance
Sorry,
of
my
being a
question
user
was, I mean, if
pays.
this became a park and ride, I mean, the reality is it might be a trade-off that, because we can't all have everything all at once, but if that was going to be the aim, to say, right, this is going to be your park and ride, this is going to be another level as well, but what it's going to take is some contribution from the users as well as, other funding. I mean, I think
We would have to canvass the community. To be honest, I wasn't considering this as the park and ride. I was considering this being continued to be used just for retail and business shopping in the area. Park and ride ideally should be placed out of town, just out of town.
Councillor Watson.
Sorry, that question's just been answered.
So, Beth, you are aware of the maintenance, it's 540,000 for the remedial work,
Yes.
which is nowhere in the budgets, and we're tight.
My question would be, why is it not in the budgets? That seems to me to be mismanagement of a council asset, that there is no maintenance budget tied to the asset. Every other asset has a depreciation funded maintenance budget, so why is this one not?
keep the rates down.
That was my question.
So,
We'll ask that question at the item.
Beth, you mentioned that Panuku have advised that it could be possible to put a covenant on the sale of the building, requesting any buyer has to provide a level of car parking. So that is not acceptable?
Well, we haven't got enough detail. I mean, we're pushed into a position now where we have to defend the sale of this, the non-sale of this building. Until we have those options in front of us, I can't take any other position, I'm sorry.
So if other options were given to you, the board would consider?
We will consider them. I can't guarantee that we would accept them, but we need those options in front of us to discuss.
All we ask is consideration. So.
Consideration, yes.
Councillor Walker.
A couple of questions, and I may have missed them in your answers. Is there any transport study for Warkworth that includes any provision for park and ride and assessment around park and ride and buses and so on?
Well, yes, the Support and Growth, Auckland Transport Support and Growth, does give an indication that park and ride facility would be considered for Warkworth once the northern motorway is completed, but not until then. So on their diagram on page 21 of the Support and Growth document, they have got an indicative piece there for park and ride.
Are there any current surveys of park and ride demand from Warkworth that you're familiar with?
No, only general parking survey is the latest we had last year from Auckland Transport, who did not measure all-day parking, only the number of available parks that they observed in Warkworth.
Okay, what's the closest park and ride for people from...
Silverdale.
And is that full, or where's that at?
I believe that's totally full.
Ask
Okay.
Greg, he goes there every
Okay,
day.
and you mentioned depreciation. I would assume that there would be a depreciation budget for this item. Have you pursued that?
Well, no, I've taken it that we're saying there's no maintenance means that depreciation is not funding the maintenance, so...
Not necessarily.
Well,
Okay.
I don't have the answer to that, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I think we'll find it's fully depreciated. That's why.
I would expect so. Thank you, Mr Chair.
So, Beth, just one other question, because there has been consultation with the local boards since late 2015. There hasn't been consultation about selling to a developer with, trying to reserve the airspace. Is that correct?
No, that option only was raised recently.
So if we were to defer this option, item today, you and your local board would be more than happy to get involved with further discussion, which could include the sale, by the way. That would be one of the options, but with preserving, covenanting a floor or whatever, yes?
Oh, certainly to defer it would be acceptable at this point.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? No, thank you.
Vote of thanks, Mr Chair. I'd be happy to give a vote of thanks to Beth for her presentation.